Hey, what's up, everybody? How's everybody doing? Welcome back to the Dr. Quack podcast. Sorry I've been away for a little bit. Kind of handled some things in life. But, on to the show. This here, I was sitting here talking to a buddy of mine. And this is where this is kind of came from. What I'm going to do is I'm going to give my top 10 greatest wrestlers of all time. This, it's a tough list to come up with, believe it or not. There are a lot of people you could throw on this list. So many. I mean, good God. I mean, there's a lot of great legends out there in the world of professional wrestling. But this is my top 10 here. So you ready for this? Here it comes. Number 10. Number 10. Let me put an honorable mention in first. And this was one guy that I really thought could have made the list, should have made the list. But, in some people's mind, he might have made the list. And that would be Shawn Michaels. Shawn Michaels, to me, was one of the greatest wrestlers in the world. I mean, definitely in his time frame, people loved him. He was the Heartbreak Kid. He was a Royal Rumble winner. Many times winning the World Championship. Main evented a lot of matches. But I couldn't put him on this list, so he's my honorable mention. Number 10, I have John Cena. John Cena, right? John Cena. Dude, the guy dominated for a decade. He's dominated well over a decade. I mean, almost 15-year career. I mean, he's kind of stepping away, but definitely main evented most WrestleManias, if not was involved in a big main event at WrestleMania. Many a time world champion, won the Royal Rumble, was definitely, and for the kids, he was a draw. Trust me, he was a draw for the young teenagers, 14 and under, and throughout time, he gained respect, Originally, he was a heel, and a lot of people loved that gimmick. And then Vince said, here, we need to turn you babyface. And that pissed off a lot of people. It happens. What can you say? But definitely John Cena goes number 10 on my list. Number 9. I'm throwing up the figures. I don't care. Number 9, I would put at Harley Race. Harley Race was one of the toughest, legitimate badasses in the 70s and 80s. And that guy right there, in my opinion, he carried the NWA, which was one of the major organizations definitely in that time frame. But he carried it. He put over Ric Flair. He helped him get over very well. He put over a lot of guys, but he definitely was a guy that you wanted to see in the ring. He was a guy that, could cut a promo like nobody's business. He was tough as nails, and he was arguably one of the best. I mean, even in the 80s, he could draw heat. He knew how to draw heat. I'll never forget his match with Junkyard Dog, WrestleMania 3, where they had to bow. The loser had to bow, and he ended up winning with the belly-to-belly. Nobody had a better belly-to-belly than Harley Race there. All right, number 8. Number 8. Bob Backlund. That is my guy right there. I mean, if you ever watched him in the 70s, he had a 5-year reign as champion. 5 years. That's almost unheard of. 5 years he went undefeated. 5 years he was a badass. He lost to the Iron Sheik, which eventually started up Hulkamania. But, because Arnold Skull threw it in the towel. But he also became the world champion again at the time, the oldest professional heavyweight champion of all time by beating Bret Hart. That Survivor Series, where they threw the towel in. His mother threw the towel in. I'll tell you, that was wild watching Bob do it. Bob, of course, was one of the smartest people in this business. Some people thought he was dry, but that man could draw. He was a real hero. And even coming in later last year out there. Moving on. Number 7. 7. The Rock. The Great One. Know your role and shut your mouth. I mean, If we were going Hollywood, I would probably go number one because there ain't nobody that draws money more than him as far as Hollywood goes. I'm talking his wrestling career. He had a really good wrestling career. He won many titles. He main evented a lot of times. I mean, he had great feuds with Steve Austin and Triple H. You know, the guy started in the business. I mean, a lot of people thought he wouldn't last because he was doing the Rocky Maivia with the whole, shit up here with the hair and it didn't get over. And eventually he became himself and really did a great job. I mean, he was with the Nation of Domination as a heel. He was getting chants of die, Rocky, die. And then he started talking and people started following. One of the probably most known wrestlers for sure, especially in today's era, because he is pretty much Hollywood. He would go higher on my list, but I think there's some guys that were definitely greater in their time. Number 6. The Undertaker. I mean, almost a quarter of a century as The Undertaker. Not even counting his previous stuff. Me, Mark Callis, and even back down there in World Class Championship Wrestling. This guy was phenomenal. I mean, when he was a heel, when he first came out, kids were scared of him. They were fearing that he might be able to kill Hulkamania. There's a lot of kids like that. And he was definitely one of the best I ever seen at this. He was totally, one of the greatest of all time. Won a Royal Rumble, won, many championships, won tag titles, involved in many main events, including Hell in a Cell with Mick Foley. A lot of people say that was one of the greatest matches of all time. And definitely when it comes to a cage match, is probably number one. I don't think there was a better match in my life that I've seen. Just my opinion. Here we go. Number 5. Bruno Sammartino. Bruno, the godfather of wrestling. Really a legitimate badass in and out the ring. The guy won championships. And he was a tough son of a bitch. He was really fitting the mold, where he belonged in the 60s, the 70s. I mean, when you were talking wrestling in those days, Bruno was definitely one of the guys. He was tough as nails. Number 4. Not that 4. Andre the Giant, for me, ranks number 4. Andre the Giant was one of the greatest in all of history. I mean, definitely the greatest big man in history for sure. I mean, the guy started in the 70s, was wrestling in the 80s, and continued on a little bit in the 90s. He was 15 years undefeated according to WWE, but, he wrestled everywhere. He wrestled, in Japan. He wrestled everywhere in the world. Had a lot of great matches. He won the world title from Hulk Hogan on a Saturday night's main event. With that controversial win. He won the world title, held it for about 2-3 minutes. Gave it to Ted DiBiase. But outside that, obviously one of the most world-renowned wrestlers. The man holds the record for the most alcohol consumed. The man was in a great movie, in The Princess Bride. He was really loved. He was a beloved guy. People, came to see him. In the old days when you wanted to, when another promoter would go to another guy and say, hey, I want your guy up here, he would say, great. Like Vince Sr., he would say, great, I want this guy. All right. Great, all right, we'll do that. That's perfect. We'll give you Andre for a week, which meant instant sellouts. That's the way that goes. Andre the Giant for me was number 4, but there are a few guys ahead of him, and for various reasons. Number 3, the Nature Boy, Ric Flair. Ric Flair, the 16-time World Heavyweight Champion. Woo! Right? Truly one of the greats. All these guys on this list are definitely among the greats. This is just slim pickings. You could take anybody on this list and almost rearrange a little bit, and I couldn't argue with you. But it's just me. Ric Flair, one of the greats. He went out there. He won a Royal Rumble to win the world title. First person to do that. And that was probably the most star-studded Royal Rumble in all history, 1993. If you've never seen it, I guarantee you probably about 80% or more are Hall of Famers It is truly one of the best Royal Rumbles that probably was in time. I would definitely go with that. I mean, of course, you're going back to his days in the 80s. We're talking about, Starrcade, there when he beat Harley Race in the cage for the title. I mean, he took on a lot of guys. Sting, great rivalries there. He had a rivalry with Hulk Hogan. He had a rivalry with, Ronnie Garvin and a bunch of other guys. Trust me, Ricky Steamboat comes to mind with him a lot. Them two would always have great matches. But, and he was definitely on this list. And here we go. I got my number 2. Number 2. Mr. Hulk Hogan here. I mean, who else could be the biggest babyface in history in his time? And then become probably the biggest heel in time. But that definition, heel, is not exactly the term to use for this because people love the NWO. I mean, this was the guy that almost helped form it. It was, Hall and Nash that brung him in, and that got everything rolling. But you go back to the 80s. I mean, his career. He won the World Championship from the Iron Sheik. Held it for a few years. Went through multiple WrestleManias with the title. Won it back against Randy Savage at WrestleMania 5. Had it for a while, ended up losing it to the Warrior. The only real clean victory that happened at that point in his career. Clean loss, rather, excuse me. He ended up beating Sergeant Slaughter for it at 7. And then, he had some great matches. He had, with Sid Vicious over at 8. And you talk about WrestleMania 9 where he came in and beat Yokozuna. I mean, the guy was Americana. This guy was MTV generation. One of, truly American icons. When people think of professional wrestling, he is definitely one of the names that come out. When I go to people and I say, yeah, did you watch wrestling as a kid? Hulk Hogan is generally the name that comes out. Generally. Probably the most popular, And he, still did good. He went on to the 2000s, still won the Undisputed Championship. So definitely he is amongst them, in my opinion. And one hell of a draw. Definitely. My number 1, and like I said, you could flip this switch any way you want to with any of these guys. I think my 1 through 4. After that, it's all dependent on who you like. But number 1, to me, the greatest wrestler of all time. And I'm basing this off of draw power, off of titles, off his career. This was a man that nobody thought would turn into be this guy. You might even say he's kind of Tom Brady-esque being a 6th-round pick. But this isn't football. This is wrestling. And this was a guy that, when he blew out his shoulder, got written off. I couldn't believe when they did that. And he went on and he made bigger things. And that'd be Stone Cold Steve Austin. Stone Cold Steve Austin, had so many catchphrases that people used. So many shirts and merchandise. This was the anti-establishment, really, guy. And this was the guy that, if this was the 80s, he would be a heel. But just because the way he worked, it really brought out, the popularity in him. He was one of the best at what he did. His finisher, probably the simplest finisher out there. And I listen to people talk, like Jim Cornette, big one. If you're going to have a finisher, make sure you can hit on everyone. There isn't a guy that Stone Cold can't hit the stunner on. There isn't a guy at all. That guy, pretty much, anybody, no matter if you're 7 foot tall, 5 foot tall, 400 pounds, or 100 pounds, he's going to nail it on you. I really feel that Stone Cold was one of the greatest draws in history. Jim Ross will call him the greatest wrestler because he was the greatest draw in history. The guy pretty much, when he got fired from WCW, could have gave up, could have quit. But what did he do? Kept going. It was inspirational. This guy went to ECW, cut some promos, put people over. And that was another thing Steve did. Steve put a lot of people over. Of course, there's reports of him not wanting to put some people over, but he did. He would put certain people over. If he felt it was justifiable or, a reason to do so, he would. And, he was definitely one of the best in professional wrestling. He was only 3-time Royal Rumble winner, King of the Ring winner, many-time world champion. tag team champion, intercontinental champion. You know, he basically did it all. He main evented a lot of WrestleManias. And to me, you know, probably the greatest draw in the business. That's my top 10. You know, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. All of them there. I would love to hear your list. Is there somebody on there that shouldn't be on there? Is there somebody that's not on there that should? By all means, let me know what you think. I am interested to hear because I want to see how people stack this list and how they compare it and if they agree with it or don't. So, I'm getting ready to make a few more videos on some certain things, but this is one I wanted to cover. You know, because somebody wanted to hear it, so I'm doing it for them. There you go, Eric. There's my top 10.